Okay. Mr. Ward, you mentioned in your opening statement, you referred to your testimony at the Ethics Committee about the abuse of tax havens by Brookfield. Can you, for the benefit of this committee and its report, we'll need perhaps some of that information here for the record at Finance. Can you give us more information about the scale and details of that abuse of tax havens, that particular example of abuse of tax havens?
Well, we've done extensive work on Brookfield, and we've also gathered previous work on Brookfield, and it is clearly one of one of Canada's largest tax dodgers. All of Brookfield's operations essentially are funneled through Bermuda. And it has had a very low effective tax rate in Canada and frankly in countries around the world for a very long period of time, which is a clear red flag of major tax avoidance and extensive use of Bermuda and lots of other different tax havens to reduce its taxable income in Canada. The potential revenue loss there is in the billions and clearly at the top tier of Canadian companies in terms of its impact on reducing funding available for public services in Canada.
Relevant time period would include when the Prime Minister was chair?
So our study was, I think, in 2023 and looked back at the 10-year period up until 2021.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go back to Monsieur Deneau. You appeared at this committee almost 10 years ago. You talked about much of the same information that you talked about today about the effect of tax avoidance by the largest tax filers and the effect that has on the societal consequences of this. It shifts the tax burden to workers, to small businesses, and from income tax to consumption, so that regular Canadians that pay the consumption taxes are paying a larger proportion of tax. Can you elaborate on the societal cost of aggressive tax avoidance and tax evasion?
Vous êtes sur mute, Monsieur Dano.
Monsieur Dano.
Mr. Deneau, you are on mute. Sorry. You are correct that I did give roughly the same presentation to the committee about 10 years ago. Often you feel like a broken record when you talk about tax havens. There have been reports coming out for decades, evidence about the issues caused by tax havens, and we have barely moved the needle. On one hand, there's an issue of mental blocks among policymakers. We just cannot figure out a way to fight fraud and abuse. But
limited time, and I want to talk about then, so over this time period, I mean, the government was new then, 2016. Now here we are almost 10 years later. They talk a lot about cracking down on evasion and aggressive avoidance, but we see no result. Can you comment on the track record now over the last 10 years on making progress on this?
What I have observed, for example, when you witness the information sharing agreement, is that what we're doing is really legalizing what should properly be considered fraud, considered outside the law. The gestures by state actors are reducing issues caused by globalization to mere technicalities. Everyone agrees to share certain information, and in doing so, we legitimize the operations described by the information. Sorry, I'm being so technical here. We receive information about transactions going on in tax havens. This gives it a certain legitimacy.
And because time is so limited, not long after the testimony you gave in 2016, the Auditor General delivered a damning report that revealed the Canada Revenue Agency will grant months or even years when it requests information from tax filers if they have offshore dealings. If they do not have offshore dealings, they have 30 days or the tax will automatically be set. Can you comment on how this punishes regular tax filers in favor of those like Brookfield, for example, that have offshore dealings?
Une réponse très courte, s'il vous plaît.
Very quickly, please. Yes, information can be difficult to get. Most people claiming to fight tax havens, including the Canadian government in recent years, are actors who themselves have benefited off tax havens.
Monsieur Deneau, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Deneau.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be a witness. I hope you can hear me. My name is Jason Ward. I'm the founder and the principal analyst of CICTAR. I'm usually based in Australia, but currently in Washington, D.C. So CICTAR is an organization that's been around now for about 7 years, and we specialize in the detailed forensic analysis of multinational tax avoidance. So just less than a month ago, on the 22nd of October, I was a witness before the Ethics Committee hearing and responded to numerous questions in relation to our extensive work over a number of years related to tax avoidance and the use of tax havens by Brookfield Corporation. I've provided links to that committee to our previous research, which also includes several reports related to tax haven abuse by large Canadian public pension funds. And I won't attempt to go through those reports, but the links have been provided to this committee as well. So tax havens, as our previous witness stated, are a huge problem for Canada and globally. I'm going to try to focus on the solutions and not on the problem here, as I think many witnesses previously and forthcoming are going into details on the effects on Canada. I will cite one piece of research that was done by the Global Tax Justice Network and released earlier this month, which I think is a very conservative estimate and suggested that Canada over a 6-year period from 2016 to 2021, US $103.4 billion in profits were shifted out of Canada, resulting in a tax revenue loss of US dollars 27.3 billion, which would be equivalent to 3% of Canada's health budget. Almost half of that estimate is related to US multinational corporations. So moving very quickly to the solution, the use of tax havens is not easy to find and not readily disclosed by corporations, particularly those headquartered in Canada and the United States. It's very hard to fix a problem if you can't see it. So greater transparency is a crucial first step. We urge the Canadian government or opposition parties to immediately introduce legislation to implement full public country-by-country reporting for multinationals in Canada. In Australia, in 2024, public country-by-country legislation was passed, and it is now the world's best reporting requirement for multinational corporations, and we hope that Canada can follow suit. Canada has the opportunity to go even further. So in Australia, all multinationals with annual revenue of 10 million Australian dollars or over will be required to report basic financial information, including number of employees, profits, losses, taxes paid or not paid, in Australia and 40 jurisdictions around the world that are widely recognized as the most abused global tax havens. The lobby groups representing the largest U.S. multinationals, also the world's largest tax dodgers, recently tried to persuade the Trump administration to threaten Australia over this simple transparency measure. I tell you this because it's an indication of how Exposure of this information threatens the underlying business model of major US corporations and other corporations who dodge taxes wherever and however they can, particularly with the abuse of tax havens and shifting profits offshore to where they are taxed not at all or taxed the least. Just the European Union has also introduced a weaker version of public country-by-country reporting, and banks in the European Union have been doing public country-by-country reporting for a decade now, with no impact on their competitiveness and trackable increases in both tax payments, revenues to governments, and a declining use of tax havens. We urged Canada to follow the Australian model and require this basic transparency measure so that government officials, lawmakers, investors, and the general public can know which corporations are abusing the tax system, where and how. Small businesses and responsible companies are at a huge competitive disadvantage if the world's largest corporations, many making record level profits, can continue to avoid obligations to pay tax in Canada and around the world. Tax authorities already get this data through confidential reporting through an OECD process. However, this information can't be shared and used for wider public purposes. Making this basic financial data public also allows tax authorities to be held accountable and make sure that they are doing their job in collecting the revenue that should be paid by the world's
Thank you,
largest
Mr. Ward. We're going to have to conclude there. Thank you so much.